I've always loved camping, but after what happened 5 years ago in the Southern Alps, I'm honestly scared to go back. The whole experience was so damn eerie that I just can't shake it, and it's made me hesitant to hit the trails again, especially in that area. Some folks have thrown out ideas like it could have been a Wendigo or a skinwalker, but I'm hoping for some reassurance that it was nothing like that so I can hike in peace again. Also, I'm curious if there's any way to protect yourself from something like that, especially here in Europe where getting a firearm is basically impossible unless you're a registered hunter or something. Honestly, anyone who camps a lot will probably agree with me. The forest at night is creepy as hell. You hear all sorts of weird sounds that don't seem to come from any animal, and strange things just happen out there. I usually brush it off as the wind or some odd echo, but this one time it was way more than that. 5 years ago, I was camping in the Southern Alps, right along the tree line. I'd set up my tent and spent the first couple days hiking, exploring the area, and even doing a bit of caving. It was beautiful, but by the third day, something felt off. I started getting this weird feeling, like something was just around. Not like it was following me exactly, but more like it was everywhere, just lurking. I figured I was just tired or dehydrated, so I tried to shrug it off. But when night fell on that third day, things got real unsettling. I was lying in my tent, trying to sleep, when I started hearing branches snapping and leaves rustling in a way that didn't feel natural at all. Sure, branches break sometimes, old rotten ones give way under their own weight, but this was different. It was too consistent, too deliberate. The next morning, I got up to check things out, and what I saw freaked me out. On 5 trees around my tent, there were marks, scratches, high up about 15 feet off the ground. Not just on one tree, but on all 5, and they looked fresh. I'm only 5 feet tall and barely 120 pounds, so there's no way I could have made those marks, and I didn't see how anyone else could have either without some serious climbing gear. The weirdest part, there were no footprints, no disturbed leaves, nothing on the ground to show anyone or anything had been there. Whatever made those marks came from the trees and didn't touch the forest floor. At that point, I was scared shitless. Was some local pulling a prank? Or was it something worse? I had a knife on me for protection, but let's be real, I wasn't about to take on whatever this was. So I packed up my stuff as fast as I could and got ready to bail. As I was heading back down to the valley, I heard this noise that still haunts me. It was like a deer's call, but way higher pitched, almost shrill, and mixed with what sounded like a man's voice. It was this gut-wrenching, bone-chilling sound that hit me like a punch. I didn't even think, I just ran. I'm not religious, but I gripped the crucifix my grandma gave me so hard my palms started bleeding. I didn't look back once, not even for a second. I swear, not even Usain Bolt could have caught me that day. The whole thing was so messed up, and I felt completely helpless. When I finally got back to civilization and asked the locals if there were people living up there, or if anything shady had ever happened in those woods, they just brushed me off. They wouldn't make eye contact, like they knew something, but didn't want to talk about it. It made the whole thing even creepier. I just want to know what the hell I experienced out there so I can go back to hiking without this fear hanging over me. When I was a kid, my family had this villa in Algeria, right by the sea. It was a gorgeous place, 2 big gardens, stunning views, the kind of house you dream about as a kid who loved biking and running around. My uncle owned an apartment on top of the villa, and he was always planning to rent it out but never got around to it. His own villa was up on a hill nearby, just as beautiful. But as much as I loved the idea of this place, I was terrified of it. There were certain rooms, the bathroom, my brother's bedroom, and my sister's bedroom, that just gave me the creeps. I can't even explain why, but every time I was in those rooms, I felt this heavy, threatening presence, like I wasn't safe. I was only 5 at the time, and my sister, who was 12 or 13, seemed to feel it too. We never talked about it back then, but I could tell she was scared. She'd always ask me to go with her to the bathroom or to her room at night, and we'd both hide under the sheets when we went to sleep, like that would somehow protect us. I didn't even know what demons were back then, and the only ghosts I knew were the friendly Casper kind. One day, I got left alone in the house. My brother was at university, my sister was still at school, and my parents weren't home yet. I usually got back from school on my own, but that day, I just didn't want to go inside. It was 4 p.m., blazing hot, and the city was so humid it was unbearable. There was no shade in the front garden, and the second garden was locked, so I had no choice but to go in. The house was always cool, almost cold, which was a relief in the summer. I went to my room to play with my toys. There's this short corridor leading to my bedroom, with a couple of closets, including one that never closed properly. That thing always freaked me out, like something was going to jump out at any second. But I pushed through, got to my room, and started setting up my toys. I loved playing pretend, giving them voices, making them talk. But then, out of nowhere, I couldn't speak. This overwhelming fear hit me, like something was right behind me, watching. My neck prickled, and I'd never felt anything like it before. You could say it was just my imagination, but can a kid's imagination make you feel that kind of primal dread? I don't think so. I knew I had to get out of that room, like something bad was going to happen if I stayed. I got up, walked calmly through the corridor, but just as I was about to reach the end, I heard a loud bang behind me. I jumped, turned around, and saw the window in my room wide open. There were trees outside, but not a single leaf was moving. No wind, nothing. My heart was pounding, but I raced to the living room, the only place I felt safe. I slammed the door shut, turned on the TV, and tried to act like I wasn't scared out of my mind, but my heart was racing like crazy. After a few minutes, I calmed down a bit and glanced out the living room window. The air was still hot, humid, and completely still, no breeze at all. But then I noticed the window shutters slamming against the wall over and over for what felt like forever. The thing is, those shutters were inside when the window was open, so even if it was windy, which it wasn't, they shouldn't have been moving like that. It didn't make sense. I stayed in the living room until my parents got home. I didn't tell them anything. I just wanted to forget it happened. I wasn't sure they'd believe me anyway. When I finally got the courage to go back to my room, the window was still open, and I noticed cracks on the wall when I closed it. I told my mom I'd found it open when I got home and that the cracks were already there. I wasn't the kind of kid to cause trouble, so she believed me. But I was still shaking, terrified. That was just one more reason to hate that house. More weird stuff happened after that. One day, my dad woke up with long, thin scratches on his arms, like cat scratches, but we only had a turtle and a dog, and the dog wasn't even allowed inside. Another time, this horrible smell came out of nowhere in the laundry room, along with this filthy water, or whatever it was. The washing machine was fine, no leaks, nothing. We were all baffled. But the worst incident, the one that really convinced me something was wrong, happened when I was playing hide and seek with my cousin. It was my turn to find him, and I saw a shadow run into my bedroom. I thought it was him, so I followed. From the corner of my eye, I saw legs sticking out from under the bed, and I was sure it was my cousin. It was getting dark, so I couldn't see clearly, but I got down on all fours and saw a little boy lying on his stomach under the bed. He had dark brown eyes, just like my cousin's, and this blank expression. I yelled, "I found you," and stood up, but as I did, I felt a sharp pain in my forehead and blood started dripping down my nose. I started crying, and next thing I know, my mom, sister, and cousin rushed into the room. I was in so much pain, dazed, and confused, because my cousin was right there with them. How the hell did he get from under the bed to the living room in 10 seconds? The only explanation I could think of was that it wasn't my cousin under the bed. So who the hell was it? The cut on my forehead was deep enough to need stitches. My dad checked it out and said it was a twisted nail sticking out from the bed frame that scratched me. When they asked what I was doing under the bed, I said I thought my cousin was hiding there. But my cousin swore he was in the living room, hiding behind my sister, and she backed him up. A year later, we moved to Spain, and that constant dread I felt in that house finally went away. My sister and brother stayed in Algeria to finish their studies, and my sister later told me she'd experienced creepy stuff there too. After they joined us in Spain, the villa sat empty for 4 years. We went back one summer when I was a teenager, and I was not happy about it. No way was I sleeping in my old bedroom again. The first night, I slept in the living room. Around 2 or 3 a.m., I started itching like crazy. I was half asleep, but it got so bad I had to get up and turn on the light. My legs and shirt were covered in fucking ants. The couch was crawling with them. I grabbed some bug spray and went to town on it. My mom, who's super superstitious, always said it's mean leaving or moving out, and she thought it was a sign. The next day, I went to stay with my aunt and didn't set foot in that house for the rest of the trip. After that summer, I never went back. I grew up in this massive old house in a small town in Iran. It was huge, 4 rooftops, 4 basements, 2 giant yards, and 3 separate living areas. Back in the day, my great-grandfather, his siblings, and all their kids lived there. But by the time I was born, it was just my family of 5 rattling around in this creepy old place. Most of the house was deserted, which made it spooky enough, but the bats living in it, that took it to another level. The worst part, though, was finding out that around 15 family members, mostly kids, were buried in the basements. Apparently, back in my great-grandfather's time, when babies or young kids died from illness, they'd just bury them in the house. I mean, what the hell? The house was creepy, but the whole town had this eerie vibe too. Pretty much everyone there believed it was home to jinns, demons from Islamic folklore. People had all sorts of stories about seeing them around. During the 10 years I lived there, weird stuff happened all the time. We'd see shadows darting by, hear footsteps when no one was there, find things move to places they didn't belong. It was like living in a haunted house, but we kind of got used to it. Still, there's one memory that sticks with me, clear as day, and it still freaks me out. I was 9, playing hide and seek with my siblings and cousins. I was the seeker, standing in a hallway outside a room with this huge window covered by heavy curtains. The window opened to the hallway, and as I stood there, I saw a pale white hand grab onto the curtains. I was sure it was my sister hiding, and I laughed to myself, thinking she'd totally given herself away. I mean, what a dumb move, right? So I went into the room, ready to call her out, but there was no one by the window. I searched every inch of that room, under furniture, behind stuff, everywhere, but it was empty. I was so sure she'd been there, but I found nothing. Freaked out, I ran out of the room, screaming my head off. My siblings and cousins came out of their hiding spots, and when I asked, none of them had been anywhere near that room. To this day, the image of that ghostly hand grabbing the curtains haunts me. I don't know what it was, but it sure as hell wasn't my sister. My family's super into rodeo. My dad's a rancher, my mom's a barrel racer, the whole deal. Growing up, I was always around it. And one day when I was about 10, I was at a rodeo with my little brother, who was 5. We were sitting up high on the bleachers, watching my mom compete, just messing around, tickling each other or something silly like that. I got a bit too rough and accidentally pushed my brother off the bleachers. It wasn't a huge fall, but for a 5-year-old, dropping 7 feet or so isn't exactly fun. I freaked out, thinking I'd really hurt him. As I'm panicking, this random woman walks up to me, smiles, and hands me a Dr. Pepper. She says, "I caught him, he's just sleeping." I was confused as hell. Caught him? What? But sure enough, I looked down, and my brother was fine, just knocked out cold from the fall. The weirdest part, that woman was gone. I looked around, and she was nowhere to be seen. It creeped me out, but I was just relieved my brother was okay. Then there was this other thing with the downstairs bathroom in our house. There was this mirror in there that always gave me bad vibes. I avoided that bathroom as much as I could, and when I had to use it, I'd look away from the mirror and get out fast. One day, I decided to face my fear and stared into it, trying to shake off the creepiness. Big mistake. I saw this old lady staring back at me, and I froze. It felt like hours just standing there, unable to move, locked in her gaze. My mom eventually found me, shook me out of it, and snapped me back to reality. That memory still messes with me, and it's the main reason I hate mirrors to this day. My family also bought some land in the Gila National Forest from this woman who was, no joke, practicing witch. We even found a stash of coke on the property, which was wild, but she'd been doing animal sacrifices and weird rituals there before we moved in. Things got strange fast. My dog started digging up animal bones, and we all began hearing voices coming from the dark tree line at night. We were remodeling these little huts and a shack she'd built, and that's when shit really hit the fan. One day, I was left alone at the camper we were staying in during the remodel. I heard a knock at the door, opened it, and found nothing. I looked around and saw something dark with glowing red eyes behind a tree. It could have been my imagination, but I swear I heard it say, "We come from the mines." I was fucking terrified, locked myself in the camper, and called my parents. That property is a rental now. And get this, a weird hermit who moved in later saw the same damn thing behind the trees, with no idea about my story. A monk refused to even step foot on the land because of the bad energy, and when we tried to donate some tiles we salvaged from the witch's shack, a Catholic nun turned them down for the same reason. It was all so bizarre. The creepiest part, though, was when I found this empty field in the woods near the property. Picture wandering through dense forest and stumbling onto a football field-sized clearing with nothing but a single boulder in the middle. It was part of an old town site for the Cleveland mine, abandoned since the 1800s. There were old stone towers, staircases leading nowhere, and a dam holding water. But the weirdest part was the holes, deep caverns that seemed to go on forever into pitch-black darkness. All I could think was that whatever I saw, whatever spoke to me, came from those mines. We heard all kinds of strange noises coming from those holes, but I never explored them. The caves could collapse, and I wasn't about to risk it. We moved away not long after, and things quieted down, but that place still gives me chills. I'm a 20-year-old uni student from Australia, and this creepy thing happened to me last year, in the winter of 2017. I'd moved a few hours away from my hometown to study, and I needed some cash while juggling school. Back in high school, I'd been a tutor and loved it, so I figured tutoring would be a solid way to make some money. It didn't take long before a mom contacted me about tutoring her son. She only told me his year level, not his exact age, but I'm pretty sure he was around 9 or 10. We set up a time to meet at their house that week. The first meeting was pretty standard. The mom was super nice, and her son was quiet but cooperative, which is all you can ask for as a tutor. Their house was this small, cottage-like place, really neat and cozy. We worked at the kitchen table in the dining room, which was part of an L-shaped setup with a living room. The entrance was right at the corner where the two rooms met, and off the dining room was the kids' bedroom. The door was closed, but it had this decorative name placard, so I knew it was his. If that door was open, you could see straight into the living room. The first few weeks went smoothly. I was happy working with a kid, and he seemed to be doing fine. But a few weeks in, I noticed he wasn't himself. He looked exhausted, like he could barely keep his eyes open, and he wasn't responding to my instructions the way he usually did. It wasn't like he was being disobedient, he just seemed out of it, like he couldn't focus. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the time of year. It was winter, the end of term 2 in Australia, when kids often get sick or run down. So I figured he was just tired. We had a 2-week break over the school holidays, and I hoped he'd come back rested and ready to go. But when we started up again after the break, he was even worse. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and I could barely get him to follow along. He was taking forever to finish his work, and it was clear something was up. I stopped the session and asked him, as gently as I could, if everything was okay. Was he feeling all right? Was something going on at school? I didn't want to pry too much, especially with his mom in the room, but I wasn't getting anywhere with him like this. What he said next gave me chills. He looked at me and said, "I can't sleep." Before I could respond, he kept going. "In the dark, a lady in a white dress crawls out of the clock, and I can see her from my room. I'm scared to sleep because I know if I close my eyes, she'll get me." He pointed to this old grandfather clock in the living room, positioned at just the right angle to be visible from his bedroom door. I mean, crawls? Not walks, but crawls. That's creepy as hell. Trying to stay calm, I asked him if he'd been watching any scary movies or reading creepy stories lately, thinking maybe he'd seen something that gave him nightmares or sparked his imagination. But he just shook his head, looking so distressed it broke my heart. At the end of the session, I brought it up with his mom, saying I was worried about how upset he seemed. Her response floored me. She said, "Yeah, I've heard strange noises coming from the living room. We only got that clock recently. It's really old. Someone inherited it, and when they died, their kids sold it, and I bought it. That's all I know about it. I keep a close eye on what he watches, and he doesn't look at anything scary. I don't know where this fear is coming from, but honestly, it freaks me out a little too." I didn't know what to think. I pushed it to the back of my mind and hoped things would get better. The next few sessions went okay. The kids seemed to be sleeping a bit better, and he didn't mention the lady again, so I figured maybe it was just a phase. But about 5 weeks later, I was back at their house, and the weather was absolute shit. Gale force winds, heavy rain, lightning, the works. It was a bit early for a storm like that, but it was bad. About 40 minutes into our session, the power cut out. The only light was the occasional flash of lightning coming through the living room window. The mom came out to check on us, but there wasn't much we could do. We waited a couple of minutes, but the power didn't come back. She suggested we call it a night, saying she'd still pay me for the full session since we were almost done anyway. I started packing up to leave, and then there was this huge flash of lightning. The mom gasped, and I looked up, and I swear to God, I saw the hem of a white lace dress being dragged across the floor in front of the grandfather clock, disappearing into the shadows. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my stuff and bolted to my car, my heart racing. That moment chilled me to the bone. I never really believed in ghosts before, but after that, I wasn't so sure. The creepiest part, if what I saw was real, then maybe that kid was actually seeing a woman crawling out of that damn clock every night. It still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I'm a 22-year-old woman from the northwest of England, pretty fit and working part-time at a well-known health club while studying at university. I've been on this whole self-improvement kick, so when my manager offered me a chance to do a lifeguard qualification for our poolside, I jumped at it. It was an all-expenses-paid trip, travel, hotel, food, and the course itself covered. No way was I saying no to that. The course was split into 2 parts, 3 days of training for days off to go back home and work, then 3 more days to finish up and graduate as an official lifeguard. The first 3 days were awesome. The hotel they put me in was nice, even if the area looked a bit sketchy. I slept well, the staff were super helpful, and I was hoping to stay there again for the second half of the course. But the day before I was due to head back, my manager told me that hotel was fully booked. He quickly found me another one in the town center. I looked it up, and the outside looked dodgy as hell, but I figured it was only for 2 nights, so I'd give it a shot. On the first day of the second round of training, one of the local girls in the course told me the new hotel had no on-site parking, and the nearby car parks were only for short stays, max 2 hours. She suggested I leave my car at the training center and offered to drive me to the hotel and pick me up in the morning. I thought that was super nice of her, so I thanked her and took her up on it. After training, she dropped me off at the hotel, a small family-run place, not a chain. No room service, no kitchen, but she pointed me toward a Sainsbury's, McDonald's, and Subway nearby, which was perfect. When I walked into the hotel, the lobby seemed okay, though there was construction going on in the surrounding rooms. The girl at the front desk, blonde hair, blue eyes, was friendly and checked me in. She smiled and said I'd been upgraded to an executive suite for no reason she could explain. I didn't question it. I was just stoked to be in a fancy room. She walked me to my room, and it was like navigating a maze. The executive suites were in a separate section, and you needed a special key card to get through the hallway, which made me feel safer since random people couldn't just wander in. When I stepped into the room, I was blown away. It was huge, stairs leading up to a bathroom, balcony, a queen-size bed, a couch, a TV with Netflix, and a table loaded with complimentary water, tea, and biscuits. I never stayed anywhere so classy. I chilled for a bit, then realized I was starving and decided to head to Sainsbury's before it got dark. Things started getting weird when I got back from the shop. I reached the door to the executive suites, which needed the special key card to open, and there was this guy just standing there in a suit. We locked eyes for a second, and I walked past him to scan my key. As soon as the door opened, I regretted it. He followed me through, way too close for comfort. I'm a nervous person on a good day, and I panic over the smallest things, so of course I freaked out. I thought better safe than sorry, and bolted to my room. I glanced back, and this guy was keeping up with me, which made it worse. I was shaking, tears in my eyes, fumbling with my key to get into my room. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and locked it. The creepiest part, it looked like he was about to follow me right into my room before I got the door closed. You're probably thinking, why didn't I call the front desk? Honestly, I don't know. I was freaked out, and with how things unfolded, I'm glad I didn't. I'll get to that. I eventually calmed down and decided to run a bath before Love Island started at 9 p.m. I stripped down, left the bathroom door open since I was alone in this nice-ass room, and sat on the toilet. From there, I had a clear view of the front door. As I stood up to flush, I heard a noise like the front door opening. I looked up, and sure enough, the door was open. I sprinted to the bathroom, slammed the door shut, locked it, and sank to the floor, sobbing. I turned off the bath to listen for any sounds from the room, but it was dead silent. I messaged my best friend, who lives in Crete, so she couldn't do much anyway. I don't even know why I texted her. I just couldn't believe this was happening. I thought if I called the police, they'd laugh at me. My friend convinced me it was all in my head, but just to be safe, I gave her the hotel name and room number and told her to call the police if I didn't text back in 5 minutes. She agreed, so I crept out of the bathroom to check. Everything looked normal. I checked under the bed, the balcony, the wardrobe. Nothing. No axe murderers hiding anywhere. I tried the front door's lock, expecting one of those manual hotel locks, but there wasn't one, which freaked me out all over again. I laughed it off nervously, grabbed one of the complimentary water bottles from the table, chugged it, watched Love Island, and passed out soon after. The next morning, I woke up late, grabbed the last water bottle, and rushed out to meet the girl picking me up for training. I pushed the whole weird night out of my mind. That evening, I got back to the hotel early to revise for my lifeguard assessment the next day. It was about 30 degrees outside and inside. No air conditioning, so I stripped down to my underwear to study. I noticed the complimentary water bottles had been restocked, which I thought was nice, assuming it was a one-off since I hadn't paid full price for the room. I studied for maybe 30 minutes, but the heat made me drowsy. I don't even remember falling asleep, but I woke up to the sound of the front door slamming shut. I felt groggy, my eyes taking a few seconds to adjust. When they did, I sat up and saw the table was full of complimentary water bottles again, way more than before. And then, right next to me on the bed, there was a random black ankle sock that definitely wasn't mine. One of my socks, which I'd left paired up on the floor, was gone, like someone had taken it and left their own sock behind. My mind went straight to the staff. Had to be them, right? But it was so creepy. This wasn't a big chain hotel where a shady employee could slip through the cracks. It was a family-run place. What if I complained and ended up confronting the creep doing this? So I didn't say anything. I barricaded myself in the room and barely slept that night. When I checked out, an elderly man I'd only seen in passing was at the desk. He asked if I liked my room, and I tried to be polite, saying yes despite the weird shit that went down. He He mentioned that my manager had called the day before I arrived, and he decided to give me a quiet room to myself, something he liked to do for younger women. That made me uneasy, but I brushed it off because I had my lifeguard assessment that day. I passed with flying colors and drove home. It wasn't until I was back in my own bed that it all hit me. Something was seriously off about that hotel. So I checked TripAdvisor, which I should have done from the start, and my manager definitely should have checked before sending a young woman there alone. Out of the 4 reviews I could stomach reading, 3 had warnings for women. They mentioned men trying to get into their rooms and staff walking in unannounced, then denying it when confronted. That's when I knew I hadn't imagined any of it. Someone had been coming into my room while I was sleeping, half naked, and staying for God knows how long, even stealing my damn sock. I told my managers, who filed an official complaint against the hotel, but nothing's come of it so far, and I don't know what else to do. It still makes my skin crawl thinking about it. I had my first serious boyfriend in high school, and we stayed together all the way through to university. A few months into our first jobs, things started going south. We were arguing a lot and drifting apart, but neither of us had the guts to call it quits. I started hanging out more with my colleagues, spending less time with my boyfriend. One guy at work, Marv, was 37, way older than me at 20. He was good looking but quiet and serious, probably because he was new at the company too. He started messaging me about work stuff, and soon we were chatting about random things. There was some mild flirting, sure, but it was mostly just getting to know each other. My relationship with my boyfriend kept getting worse, and one morning before work, he broke it off. I was a mess, crying and panicking at the office. My colleagues noticed and decided to take me out for drinks after work to cheer me up. I don't usually drink much, so I got drunk pretty fast. Everyone else started leaving, and soon it was just me and Marv at the bar. I told him I wanted to go home. I was desperate to call my boyfriend and try to fix things, but Marv convinced me to have a couple more drinks. Big mistake. The rest of the night is a blur. All I remember is crying and telling him over and over that I wanted to go home. Next thing I know, I woke up naked in a random hotel room next to Marv. He woke up with this dreamy smile, going on about how we made love passionately and shit like that. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't remember much from the night before, just the crying and wanting to leave. I was so confused and grossed out. He drove me back to my parents' house, and before I got out of the car, he leaned in to kiss me. I dodged it and bolted. A few minutes later, he texted me about how much fun we had and how he was in love with me. I was creeped the fuck out. I told him I wasn't ready for another relationship, but that we could stay friends, trying to be polite. God, I was so young and naive. After that, he started texting me multiple times a day, even at work, saying he loved me. I tried to avoid him, but I couldn't stop him from showing up to group outings with colleagues. I started dreading those because he'd always try to sit next to me, and during meals or meetings, he'd slip his hand under the table to stroke my thigh or crotch. Once, when we were alone in the office elevator after work, he pushed me against the wall and started kissing me. I shoved him off, making some excuse about getting caught, but I was freaking out inside. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't tell someone or quit right then. I was so worried about being judged or labeled a slut at my first job. I was just dumb and scared. Eventually, I got back together with my boyfriend, and we moved in together. I never told him about Marv, but when Marv found out I was back with my boyfriend, things got batshit crazy. He somehow figured out where we lived and started parking across the street at night, just sitting in his car until morning. On weekends, I'd spot his car parked near restaurants we were at or see him seated behind us at the movies. He even followed us to church once, which gave me chills because I never expected that. It felt like I couldn't escape him, work, home, everywhere. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, but too scared to confront him because I didn't want my boyfriend to find out about that night. Marv kept texting and calling, going on about how passionate I was that night, making me terrified that maybe I'd acted that way and my boyfriend would leave me if he knew. I'd reply to his messages just to keep things from blowing up, but it was always him breaking down, begging me to leave my boyfriend, declaring his undying love. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant with my boyfriend's kid. We were thrilled and planned a small wedding. When Marv found out, he lost it, convinced the baby was his, even though the timeline made that impossible. He started cornering me at work, talking about how he loved our child and was planning to marry me, buy a new house, even pick out a name for the kid. It was insane. The final straw was when he showed up at my front door with a fucking engagement ring, hysterical, begging me to marry him. Thank God my boyfriend wasn't home. I was terrified but managed to talk him down, saying I'd think about it. I even gave him a quick kiss just to get him to leave. That incident pushed me over the edge. I finally told another male colleague everything, and he confronted Marv, threatening him to back off. I couldn't handle the pressure anymore, so I quit my job. Marv didn't stop, though. He kept messaging me, showing up at random places, even my house. Thankfully, we moved to a new place after the wedding, and I changed my phone number. He didn't crash the wedding, which was in another state, and I thought maybe he'd finally give up. He started emailing me instead, long-ass poems and messages about wanting to be together. I ignored them, and eventually they stopped. My colleague told me Marv moved to another country, supposedly heartbroken. I didn't care. Life went on. I had my kid, who I loved to death, and my marriage with my boyfriend, now husband, is great. But then I went to a former colleague's wedding, and there he was. My heart dropped. We were seated at the same table, and I caught him staring at me all night. The worst part was when I came back from the bathroom and saw him cradling my baby. He'd asked my husband if he could hold her, and was snuggling her like she was his. I grabbed my kid, told my husband I wasn't feeling well, and we left early. He asked who Marv was, and I brushed it off, saying he was just some old colleague I barely knew. A few days later, I got a text from a random number asking how I was doing. I asked who it was, and it was him. I ignored it and changed my number the next day. Over the years, I've gotten random emails and texts from him, forcing me to change my number so often that my husband, friends, and family have started questioning it. I always make up some excuse. The last I heard about him was a few months ago when my colleague said Marv had messaged him, asking if there was still a chance for us to get back together. I wish I could erase that whole nightmare year from my life, but what's done is done. I just want him to leave me and my family the fuck alone. I was 14 years old, just starting 8th grade in South Texas, where hurricane season was still very much a thing. It was a Friday night, and it was just me and my mom at home. My dad was out of town for work. I had plans to spend the night at a friend's house, but a tropical storm was rolling in, and at the last minute, my mom decided I should stay home. I was pissed. Tropical storms weren't usually a big deal around here, and I thought she was totally overreacting. Typical 14-year-old know-it-all mentality, right? But mom felt bad about it, so we made the best of it, rented a bunch of movies, ordered pizza, and grabbed a ton of ice cream for an epic night in. Our house was a split level built in the 1950s, I think with this cool postmodern vibe, maybe Frank Lloyd Wright inspired or something. The entire back of the house was floor-to-ceiling windows, 8 or 9 feet tall, just a massive wall of glass. The place had an open floor plan, so the kitchen was the only defined room with walls on the first floor. My bedroom was right off the kitchen, while my parents' room was at the top of the stairs on the opposite end of the house. That's important for later. Mom went to bed around 10 p.m., and I headed to my room to watch a couple of movies I'd rented just for me. The storm was picking up by then, the wind was howling, and the rain was coming down sideways. I was in the middle of watching The New Guy when I glanced at my clock, 12:53 a.m. I was getting sleepy, my eyes heavy, and with the weather so bad, I started thinking maybe staying home wasn't the worst thing after all. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I knew, there was this massive crash. It sounded like one of the huge windows in the dining room or living room had shattered. We lived in a super wooded neighborhood, so my first thought was that a tree branch had gotten tossed around in the storm and smashed through a window. I got out of bed and headed through the kitchen toward the dining room. As I approached the doorway, I saw my mom coming down the stairs. Then I froze. There, in the dining room, was a man standing in a pile of broken glass and blood. He was young, maybe early 20s, soaking wet, barefoot, and covered in cuts with shards of glass sticking out of him. It was clear he'd literally run through one of our windows. The way he was standing, I couldn't get to my mom. He looked wild, but it took him a second to notice us. When he did, he immediately launched into this frantic explanation about how someone was chasing him, trying to kill him, and we needed to call the cops. My naive 14-year-old brain didn't question it for a second, but my mom was giving him major side-eye. We moved into the kitchen, and she grabbed my arm to keep me close. I picked up a kitchen towel to try and help with his bleeding. He was dripping blood everywhere. Mom pulled out her cell phone and started calling our neighborhood patrol. I noticed and grabbed the landline to dial 911. We both finished our calls, and then it was just waiting. The guy couldn't sit still. He kept getting up, pacing, peering out the kitchen windows, muttering under his breath. He didn't seem to care that he was cut up and bleeding all over the place. What happened next was a blur. It all went down so fast. The doorbell rang. It was the neighborhood patrol my mom had called. The sound sent the guy into a full-on panic. He jumped up, grabbed me, and put me in a chokehold. My mom started screaming, begging him to let me go. He was frantic, dragging me through the dining room and living room toward the stairs. The doorbell rang again, and Mom was still pleading as he pulled me up the steps. She had to make a split-second choice: follow us or run to open the front door. She bolted for the door. Just as he dragged me up the last step, the house alarm started blaring. He pulled me into my parents' bedroom, but the second we got there, he let go of me and started freaking out. It was the lights. Something about them set him off. He started smashing lamps, screaming that they were burning him. There was a small garden off my parents' room with garden lights that stayed on at night, and he grabbed a chair, hurling it at the glass door to try and smash it, probably to get to those lights. I don't know. I crawled into a corner to get away from him. When he turned to grab another chair, completely distracted, I saw my chance. I bolted, running down the stairs as fast as I could. By the time I reached the bottom, the cops were already in the house, guns drawn. One of them grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the way, rushing me outside to an ambulance where my mom was waiting. The adrenaline started to fade, and it hit me like a truck. What had just happened? I started shaking, and I could suddenly feel pain around my throat from where he choked me. There was a lot of yelling and screaming from inside the house. About 10 minutes later, the cops came out with a guy in handcuffs. When he saw me, he tried to lunge at me again, which was terrifying. I had a bruised windpipe, but was otherwise okay, I guess. Later, I found out the guy was 20, a chemistry major at one of the local universities. He and some friends, also chem students, had made their own PCP. Apparently, it was his first time trying it, and he had a really bad reaction. They'd been driving to grab some food when he started acting paranoid and freaking out. At a drive-thru, he demanded to be let out and just took off running. Thinking someone was chasing him was a common hallucination during a bad trip, and light sensitivity was a side effect too. Our house was the only one on the street without a full fence, which is how he ended up crashing through our back windows. The guy wasn't some hardened criminal. He'd never been in trouble before, was a good student, and was pretty much the last person you'd expect to do something like this. When I got older, it really sank in how easily that could have been someone I knew. I had friends who became chemistry majors and dabbled in hard drugs. Thankfully, that night didn't end any worse than it did, because it could have gone in a much darker direction. When I was 8 years old, I lived in a tiny village I'll call Hardest Fields for this story. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody's business. If your parents sent you to the bakery and you were short on cash, the lady behind the counter would just smile and say, That's okay. I'll catch up with your folks later. The village was surrounded by farmland, with one main road cutting through it that eventually led to a highway. Some side roads were just dirt tracks leading to houses or farms. Hardest Fields had its own little elementary school, just a 5-minute walk from my house, and I loved it there. My class had only 8 kids, including me, so bullying wasn't really a thing, and we all knew the teachers since they were basically our neighbors. My best friend back then was Jenny, and we were inseparable. We'd spend almost every afternoon together, sometimes even having sleepovers on school nights. Jenny lived on the outskirts of the village, while I was closer to the center, so playing at her house was always a blast. Her parents had some sheep, and though they weren't full-on farmers, we loved messing around in the cornfield behind their place, building hideouts among the crops or playing nights. One day after school, we were bored out of our minds, so we asked Jenny's mom if we could walk to the farm behind their house. We'd heard their dog had just had puppies, and we were dying to see them. Her mom said okay, but told us to be back by 4:30. Like I said, Jenny's house was right on the edge of the village, surrounded by fields. To get to the farm, we had to take a dirt track that was more of a path than a road. It stretched on for about 20 minutes to another village, lined with bushes, trees, and some patchy forest. We were walking along, chatting and laughing, when we saw a car coming toward us. We didn't think much of it and stepped to the side to let it pass. As it got close, the guy behind the wheel rolled down his window and slowed down, almost stopping. He asked what we were doing out there. We told him we were headed to the farm to see the puppies and kept walking, since we weren't supposed to talk to strangers. After a couple of minutes, I glanced over my shoulder and saw the car had turned around and was creeping along behind us. I nudged Jenny and whispered about it. She said maybe he was lost, so we didn't pay it much mind and kept going. The car passed us again, and I started to relax, thinking Jenny was right. But then it turned around again and started coming back toward us. By now, we could see the farm in the distance, but it was too far to make a run for it, and Jenny's house was too far back. My stomach started to knot up, and I told Jenny I was getting scared. She grabbed my hand, and we bolted into the bushes beside the road. We dropped to our hands and knees, crawling until we found a spot where we could see the road but stay hidden. My heart stopped when I saw the guy get out of his car and start poking around where we ducked into the bushes. He was calling out, "You can come out now, I'm not going to hurt you. And are you girls playing hide and seek?" I was on the verge of tears, and I could see Jenny was just as terrified. After what felt like forever, probably 5 minutes, he finally gave up, got back in his car, and drove off toward the other village. We stayed put for a bit, just to be sure, then crawled out and headed straight back to Jenny's house. We hadn't even walked far when we heard a car again. Sure enough, it was the same guy, same car coming back. Jenny screamed, "Run," and we sprinted across the road into the cornfield. We didn't look back, just ran as fast as our legs could carry us, hearing the car's brakes screech behind us. The guy was yelling something, but we didn't stop to listen. We just wanted to get to Jenny's house. When we finally burst through the door, we locked it behind us and collapsed. Jenny's mom came downstairs, saw us freaking out, and asked what was wrong. We were crying so hard we could barely get the words out, but we managed to tell her the whole story. Her face went pale as a ghost. She called the cops right away and then rang my parents to come pick me up. Jenny and I talked to the police, but that was pretty much it. My parents took me home, and I slept in their room for a couple of nights after that. We didn't play at Jenny's house much after that day. The car was spotted a few times later, but the police never really did anything about it, and thankfully, no one went missing or got hurt. Still, that dirt track gives me the creeps to this day. This messed up thing happened to me when I was 16, back in 2020 during that whole lockdown crap in Georgia. We were living in this suburb outside Atlanta. You know, one of those quiet neighborhoods where nothing ever happens except people mowing their lawns too early on weekends. My parents were both working from home, stressed as hell about the virus, and I was stuck doing online school, which basically meant scrolling TikTok all day, and pretending to pay attention in Zoom classes. I hated it, felt like the world was ending, but at least my room was my safe space, posters on the walls, fairy lights, that kind of teen girl vibe. I'd stay up late binging YouTube or chatting with friends online, then crash around midnight. That night, I think it was like mid-June, hot and sticky even with the AC blasting. I went to bed early for once, maybe 11 p.m., because I was exhausted from arguing with my mom about chores. I remember tossing and turning a bit, but eventually I dozed off. Then, around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. You know that feeling where your heart's racing, but you don't know why? My room was dark, just a sliver of moonlight sneaking through the blinds, and at first I thought maybe I had a nightmare or something. But then I felt eyes on me. Like that creepy, prickly sensation on the back of your neck. I sat up slow, rubbing my eyes, and that's when I saw him. There was this guy, a full-grown man, sitting in my desk chair across the room. Just sitting there, still as a statue, staring right at me. He wasn't moving, wasn't blinking from what I could tell in the dim light. He looked maybe 40s, scruffy beard, wearing a dark hoodie that kind of blended into the shadows. His eyes were locked on mine, wide open, like he was studying me or waiting for something. I froze for a second, thinking maybe I'm hallucinating or it's my dad checking on me. But no, Dad's way shorter, and this dude was lanky with this weird calm expression that made my stomach drop. How the hell did he get in? My window was locked, door too, or at least I thought so. I don't even remember deciding to scream. It just ripped out of me, this blood-curdling yell that echoed through the house. Who the fuck are you? Get out, I shouted, scrambling back against the headboard, grabbing my pillow like it was a shield or something stupid. He didn't say a word, just bolted up from the chair, knocked it over with a crash, and ran straight for the door. He yanked it open and vanished down the hallway. I kept screaming, "Mom, Dad, there's someone in here." My parents burst in seconds later, Dad with a baseball bat from the closet, flipping on lights everywhere. The front door was wide open. He jimmied the lock somehow, quiet as a ghost. Cops came quick, took my statement, but they didn't find much. No fingerprints that matched anything, no cameras in our neighborhood back then. Turns out, there'd been a few break-ins nearby, creeps sneaking into houses while people slept, maybe looking for stuff to steal or worse. But this guy didn't take anything. He was just watching. Like some sicko getting off on scaring a kid. I couldn't sleep in that room for weeks. Ended up crashing on the couch with all the lights on. Even now, at 21, I double-check locks, got a dog that barks at everything, and I wake up sometimes convinced someone's in the corner staring. My name's Jordan, and man, this bullshit still gives me chills even thinking about it now in 2025. Back in 2021, I was 28, just moved to Nashville, Tennessee for a new job in marketing. You know, one of those remote gigs during the tail end of COVID where everyone was still kind of paranoid about everything. I couldn't afford much, so I rented this cozy little one-bedroom apartment in an old building downtown from this guy named Mark, the landlord. He seemed chill at first, mid-50s, balding, always smiling too wide. But hey, the place was cheap, had that vintage vibe with exposed brick and all. I figure it was a steal, signed the lease quick without thinking twice. First few weeks were fine. I was settling in, unpacking boxes, ordering pizza way too often cause cooking felt like too much effort. But then I started noticing weird stuff in the bathroom. It's this tiny room, just a sink, toilet, and a big mirror over the vanity, the kind that's probably been there since the 80s. One night, around midnight, I was brushing my teeth, staring at my tired-ass reflection, and I spotted this tiny hole in the mirror, like right at eye level, but off to the side. It was small, maybe the size of a pencil tip, but it didn't look like a crack or damage too perfect, you know? I shrugged it off at first, thought maybe it was just a flaw in the glass or some old nail hole. But it bugged me, kept catching my eye every time I showered or whatever. A couple days later, I'm in there again, and I get this creepy feeling like someone's watching me. Paranoia from being alone in a new city, right? But nah, I lean in close to the mirror, shine my phone flashlight on that hole, and holy shit, there was something behind it. Like a glint, metallic, or glassy. My heart started pounding. I grabbed a screwdriver from my toolbox. Yeah, I ain't handy, but I had one, and pried the mirror off the wall, careful not to shatter it. Behind it, a freaking hole drilled straight through the drywall, and tucked in there was this tiny camera, like one of those Wi-Fi spy cams you see on Amazon for creeps. Wires running to an outlet, lens pointed right where you'd stand naked in the shower or at the sink. I yanked it out, hand shaking, and saw it had a little SD card slot. But the real kicker, it was wireless, probably streaming somewhere. I freaked out, called the cops right then, even though it was like 2 a.m. They showed up, 2 officers looking skeptical at first, but when I showed them the setup, they got serious quick. They took the camera, dusted for prints, and asked about the landlord. Mark lived in the unit above mine, so they went up there while I waited downstairs, pacing like a maniac. Turns out they found his phone synced to the damn thing. App open and everything, history of connections. But it got worse. They searched his place with a warrant the next day and seized this massive 5 terabytes hard drive from his closet, plugged into his computer. Cops told me later it was packed with videos, hundreds of them, from my bathroom and others before me. Me showering, changing, just living my life, all recorded without me knowing. Some clips went back months to previous tenants, I guess. Made me want to puke thinking how long he'd been doing this shit. Mark got arrested for invasion of privacy voyeurism. All that, he's still rotting in jail last I heard, but the damage was done. I broke the lease, moved out that week to a hotel, then crashed with a coworker till I found a new spot. Even now, I check every mirror, every vent in bathrooms wherever I go, hotels, airbums, you name it. That feeling of being watched, they don't go away easy. I was 25 back then, living in this crappy walk-up apartment in Brooklyn, New York. You know, one of those old buildings with creaky floors and an elevator that felt like it was going to drop any second. I was working as a barista in Manhattan, scraping by. But at least I had my own place after dumping my ex, this asshole named Derek. We dated for like a year, but he turned out to be a controlling prick. Jealous as hell, always accusing me of cheating when I wasn't. When I finally kicked him out, he went nuts, screaming that I'd regret it, that he'd make sure I had a terrifying experience I'd never forget. I thought it was just hot air, you know. Changed my locks, blocked his number, and moved on. Cops said without proof, there wasn't much they could do. That night, it was late October, chilly as fuck outside. I was coming home from a double shift around 11 p.m., dead tired, carrying groceries up in the elevator like usual. The building was quiet, most folks asleep, and I was the only one in there. Doors closed. I hit the button for floor 4, and it started going up slow, that familiar hum. Then, bam, total blackout. The lights flickered once and died. The whole thing jerked to a stop between floors 2 and 3. Pitch black, no emergency lights kicking in like they should. I panicked a bit, fumbled for my phone to call maintenance, but before I could even unlock it, I felt hands grab me from behind. Strong arms around my neck, yanking me back, and this hot breath in my ear whispering, "Told you it'd be terrifying." I screamed bloody murder, thrashing like crazy, but he was bigger, punched me in the ribs, slammed my head against the wall. I clawed at his face, felt skin under my nails, but he kept choking me, saying shit like, "You think you can just leave me?" It was Derek's voice, no doubt that raspy smoker's tone I'd heard a million times. The elevator was stuck, no way out, and I thought that was it. He was going to kill me right there in the dark. I managed to knee him in the groin hard, and he loosened up enough for me to shove him off. I banged on the doors, yelling for help, and after what felt like forever, probably a minute, the lights snapped back on, elevator started moving again. Doors opened on my floor, and he bolted out, hoodie pulled low, disappearing down the stairs before I could even catch my breath. I collapsed in the hallway. Neighbors came running from the noise, called 911. Cops showed up, took me to the hospital, bruised ribs, black eye, but nothing broken. They pulled the building's security cams, and that's when it got real fucked up. Footage from the basement showed Derek sneaking in earlier that evening, tampering with the fuse box, flipping the breaker for the elevator power, timing it perfect so it'd cut out when I got home. He must have been watching the lobby cam or something. Knew my schedule. Clear as day on video, his face right there. No mask or nothing. They arrested his ass the next day for assault, stalking. All that turns out he'd been lurking around for weeks, planning this revenge crap. He got like 5 years, but honestly, it didn't fix shit for me. I moved out of New York a month later, back to my folks in Jersey. Couldn't ride an elevator without freaking out for years. Back in 2022, we were living in this old Victorian house in Seattle. Me, my wife Jen, and our 2 kids, Lily, who's 10, and little Max at 7. We bought the place cheap because it needed work, but it had that charm, you know. Big attic for storage, creaky floors, the whole deal. Life was normal. I worked construction, Jen did remote accounting, kids in school. But around fall that year, things started getting weird at night. It began subtle. Like around 2 a.m., we'd hear these faint footsteps up in the attic. Thump thump, like someone pacing slow. At first, we figured squirrels or rats, old house happens, right? Jen would nudge me awake, whispering you hear that. And I'd grumble, yeah, probably animals will set traps tomorrow. But it kept happening every damn night, and then came to whispers. Low mumbling, like someone talking to themselves, words we couldn't make out but definitely human sounding. The kids started complaining too. Lily said she heard voices from the ceiling in her room, which freaked us out, but we brushed it off as imagination. We called an exterminator. Guy checked the attic, found nothing, no droppings or nests. Said maybe wind or pipes, but deep down I knew that was bullshit. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. After a week of no sleep, I manned up one night. Jen was scared, begging me not to go up alone, but I grabbed a flashlight and a ladder from the garage, pulled down the attic hatch around midnight when the noises started again. Climbed up, heart pounding like a drum, sweeping the beam around. Dust everywhere, old boxes we hadn't unpacked, insulation hanging loose. But then in the corner by the vents, I saw it, a ratty old blanket crumpled up, like someone had been sleeping on it. Next to it, empty cans of tuna and beans, wrappers from protein bars. My stomach dropped. Then I spotted this beat-up flip phone half buried under the blanket, screen cracked but still powered on. I didn't touch it at first, just stared, realizing someone had been living up there. I yelled down to Jen to call the cops, scrambled back down shaking, locked the hatch best I could. Police showed up quick, 2 officers with flashlights, went up while we waited downstairs hugging the kids. They came down pale, said, yeah, signs of squatting, grabbed the phone and stuff as evidence. But then they did a full sweep, checking vents and crawl spaces. Turns out the attic connected to this old duct system running through the whole house, big enough for a skinny guy to crawl around. They found him hiding in there, this gaunt dude in his 30s, filthy clothes, wild eyes, squeezed into a vent above the kids' rooms. He'd been living off scraps he stole from our pantry at night, sneaking down when we slept. Cops dragged him out kicking and muttering, cuffed him right there in our hallway. But the real horror hit later at the station. They cracked that phone, hundreds of photos, all timestamped going back 3 months. Pics of us through cracks in the ceiling vents, me and Jen sleeping, the kids playing in their rooms, even showering. God, it makes me sick. Notes too, like a diary. Lily brushes teeth at 8 p.m., family dinner 6:30, Mike snores loud, Jen alone Tuesdays. He'd been watching us the whole time, mapping our lives like some twisted game. Turns out he was a homeless guy who'd broken in through a loose window months ago, set up camp and just stayed. No priors, but cops said he was obsessed, probably planning something worse.